Yeah, hi. So almost we are afternoon. So hi everybody. So as she mentioned, I'm Dr. Ghada Al Murshidi from the UAE University from the Education College. Today I will discuss an idea about the blended learning that was conducted before the COVID-19 with our students who are, learning English as a foreign language as the UAE context. So everybody, as we know, that the idea of blended learning, we cannot do it without the technology. So for example, if we are in maybe some like African countries that I had visited, for example, in Tanzania and other countries, they cannot use the blended learning or the online learning because they don't have the technology and the internet services. But alhamdulillah, for example, in the UAE, we can do that. So what is a blended learning? Blended learning is combination between the face-to-face and also the online learning. And based on the previous studies, this blended learning strategies were used, but I thought of the context of UAE and especially our university, the UAE University, because we were in different cycles to trying the process of blended learning with the ALLT program and CLT center. So my research was aimed to find out about our student perceptions of the blended learning and focusing more on the the language skills. So my research questions and all the independent variables and dependent variables and also the hypothesis all focus on the student's ability to learn, the speed of online information captures, and also the increased capacity of the knowledge acquisitions, and also that with the students' perceived ease of the blended learning and their perceived usefulness of using the blended learning, and also their positive behavioral intention to use. Is it like positive or negative or in between? And also I asked kind of questions to find out about what the students suggest to improve the blended learning with the actual implementation. So as I mentioned, based on the previous studies, the blended learning, it is online with the face-to-face, and the students had thought about the blended learning as a positive impact on their learning outcomes, and also when we connect it to the institutional also learning outcomes. So some of them, based on the previous studies, they mentioned there was a success in the process. So when we think about the blended learning, we thought about some principles. We thought about, is it effective in the achievement of the learning outcomes? What about the student learning styles? That means by using the blended learning, we can use different learning styles of the students, and we can adapt our learning based on that. Also, we're thinking about the learning students and the students' needs, in the classroom and also for the online, and also how the students will able to acquire the knowledge through the blended learning strategies. As mentioned, the importance of blended learning, especially for learning the English language as a foreign language, it was a positive effect on the students, especially their motivation to learn through the learning, the blended learning processes, and which is different than the traditional way face-to-face learning processes. For that, the students, trying to use, technical programs, applications through the blended learning. So that means the resources are accessible for our students or not. And also some students focus on the speaking and listening skills for a language. So in general, some studies in 2020 show that there is positive results with blended learning, especially with the COVID-19. So as I mentioned, the variables, one of them perceived usefulness of the blended learning. Is it useful for our students? So when we think about the usefulness, that means do the technology will make our learning and our student learning better than the face-to-face and the traditional way of teaching the language. And also we are thinking about the collaborative learning, when the students are collaborating with others through the technology and the blended learning, so they are not isolated and working alone, especially with different kinds of tasks. And as we mentioned, to do that, we have to build our learning environment, which is being more positive and supportive, to have a positive effect on the student learning and also the faculty members. Because for example, if the faculty members don't like the technology and don't like to use different kinds of strategies, applications, and they don't have the motivation to learn those kinds of technology, they will not succeed in their teaching with the online and blended learning. So this was the first hypothesis. As I mentioned, it's about the perceived usefulness of the blended learning, and is it positive when we think about the student behavioral intention to use it. The second hypothesis and variable was related to the perceived ease. Is it easy to use all these kinds of technologies and strategies with the blended learning? So based on the previous studies, when we think about the technology, sometimes we think about what kind of innovation and all that. And is it easy to use it, especially for the students? And, do the students, familiarize themselves? Usually, for example, in my class, what I do, before using any kind of applications, programs, any kind of technology, I have to familiarize my students. So maybe I will send them videos or maybe discuss any class and show them exactly how we can use it and try it and implement it with my students. So this will make it easier for the students to use it, and also for the teacher to think about, is it easy to use with the students and with the timing and all that during the class time. Because if it is easy, will be easier and rapidly adapted in the classroom, and the students easily will learn this skill. So as I mentioned, this hypothesis number 2, which is about the perceived ease of use the online and the blended techniques. So based on this, there is a model that I use, is the technology acceptance model. So it has the 3 constructs, which I mentioned: the usefulness, the perceived ease of the use, and the behavioral intention to use. Because if the students are not intended to use it, or they don't like to use the technology, will not be easier for the teacher to use all those kinds of technology. And that's what sometimes I'm facing with my students. They don't have the intention to use those kinds of technologies. So based on the studies, for example, there is kind of correlation between the intention to use the technology and also the actual use of the online technology. So that, hypothesis 3 and 4 and 5, I discuss all these points regarding, is there kind of positive association between the behavioral intention to use the blended and online learning technology and the actual system use? Because, for example, if you think that, you are intentionally, you want to use it, it's different than, the actual use of the system. So it will be connected with the perceived usefulness and also the perceived ease of using the blended learning strategies. So this is my, if you can see it with all the hypotheses. So I have the perceived usefulness, the perceived ease of use, the behavioral intention to use, and with the actual system use. For this study, I use the Q method, which is like, it's annually, like, with the Excel and all that. It takes, time to use this methodology and strategies. So I had, 47, statements and clauses. 36 were like affirmative, and the others were like, negative expression. Okay. So the students were like 251, and they were like, in spring semester 2018 to 2019. As I said, this was before like the COVID-19, before like March 2020. So I will discuss some of the data analysis and results. So I used ANOVA to analyze that. So in general, because there is like different steps of the analysis. So after a 5-step analysis, general statistical difference, it means there is not that much. But then when I did the by-rate correlation between, those variables, there is kind of differences. So what did I find in this study is, when we think about the perceived usefulness and also the perceived ease of use of blended learning, so there is kind of impacts on the behavior intention of students to opt for the blended learning and the online learning, and to practice it and use it for, especially for learning the language, and especially now it is what, the English language. And their behavioral intention increase the adaptability level of the students for actual system use, because if they are intended to use it and then they actually start to use it, we can, they are motivated to use it, will be easier for us to implement the blended learning. So with the blended learning, we noticed that the students they got interested in the topics and the issues, and they were not like distracted with other issues. When we compare it maybe sometimes with the face-to-face kind of learning and teaching. So it's similar to some of the studies that we noted that the students they display higher magnitude within individual abilities to interest the online learning, and there is kind of confidence in relation to the online knowledge acquisition comparing to the other techniques. I mean the traditional and to mostly like just only the face-to-face. And with the online learning and also the blended, it's encourage what the students' creativity, especially with using different kind of programs. Like for example, we are using, the Socrative, Kahoot, Lino, Padlet. We are using, the Kaggle. It's, the students, for example, after reading about a case, they will do kind of mind mapping and all that. And also, like Beyond, they try to create videos based on the Beyond and video scripts. So as I mentioned, like generally there was like no significant differences, but I mean, when with more like digging in the data, we thought, the integration of the online blending discussion format in the course encouraged the in-depth discussion of the ideas and the concepts that taught in the English language course among the students. So that means, the students, they are not wasting time, but they, they are digging in the, the information and the acquiring the knowledge, which is good. And also, for example, the students mentioned like, the setting and the environment of the online, especially with the blended learning, the student, with the online, they can ask any kind of questions, and which is different than the other, like, part with the face-to-face. So it's good for the student, to ask whatever they are thinking of, and develop their critical thinking also through the whole process, because, they are free to ask what they want about the topic that they are studying. But some students mentioned that, there is, less kind of social interaction with their colleagues, which is different than face-to-face. Some of the students, they were like, feeling annoyed because, sometimes they have to spend time to learn about the technology, how to use a kind of, like application, and they will spend time to like, for example, especially for beyond, registering and all that, it takes time. And sometimes, for example, when are using the discussion through like, Blackboard or other kind of LMS systems, so sometimes with the online discussion, they feel like, sometimes they are isolated. Especially, they have time to watch videos and then, write all these kind of discussions. And which is good because, when we implemented the study that, we have different sections. So the students, we told the students there are some sections will be like a blended learning, others will be, the face-to-face. So the students, they have to choose what they want. So like, some of the students and most of them choose the blended learning. So, that means, there is kind of intention to use that and, benefit from the online learning. As I mentioned, students like, had kind of suggestions like how we can improve the blended learning in future, and that's what we are doing now with the COVID-19. So as a start point, as they mentioned that, having face-to-face with the online was good for them as a starting. As we compare their suggestions with, a study in Iran with Iranian students, that when they combine both the traditional and with the technology and the online learning, it has, a success for the students, like, output and learning, because, they were motivated and they enjoyed the online discussion. So it depends also on the students and also on the teachers.
Dr. Ghada, just a polite reminder, we have 5 minutes left in the presentation time.
Okay. So based on the studies, okay, we noted that, the students, they accept the idea of the blended learning, which is good, based on the, like, the other variables. And this is our references. I'm almost done. If we have time, I can discuss more about, in general, like how we apply it and all that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ghada, for the very interesting presentation. This sounds actually promising. We have a couple of questions, if you don't mind, please. We have a question asking about the Q method. What are the challenges that was faced in this method, and any recommendations where to learn more about this specific method?
Yeah, this method actually is not easy, and after I use it, I don't recommend to use it again, because it's like manually, and you do it like, you you download all the data and Excel, and it takes time to do with all the questions. And so, no, I think it's better to stick with maybe SPSS or PLS. Now I'm using more the PLS, the Smart PLS, and also the R.
So generally you recommend more complicated or more advanced statistical analysis, yeah? Yeah,
it's not about more advanced, because each one has, different kind of, managing the, it's more about managing the data. The Q methodology, it needs time from you as a researcher to sit and do it, because, you do it manually. So it takes time, and you have to understand how you calculate all this, the means, and it's manually, and it is old system. But I like to use it because, at the beginning, when I start to learn about it, because of the questions, I have, lots of questions, and that's why I start to use it. But now I'm using the Smart PLS, and it's easier, because with technology, it's easier to use it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Another question, Dr. Ghada, please. Based on your research, do you think if this research is to be replicated currently after the students have tried the blended learning or the online learning because of the COVID, what would you anticipate the results to be? Do you think there will be a difference in the results, or let's say the level of acceptance of the students?
Yeah, actually, I'm doing different kind of research regarding this with different groups from different countries. So yes, it will be different, because now the students, most of them, they are obligatory to do it. So it's not now about their intention or So yeah, it will be different. Now I'm focusing more on the communicative approach of because based on the study, some of the students mentioned that they feel sometimes they're isolated, they don't communicate. So I'm focusing on this, challenge they are facing.
Okay, that's interesting.
Totally different. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ghada, for the explanation. One more question, please, before we conclude this session. I wanted to ask you about actually learning styles. Do you think the students' learning styles can affect their engagement in such kind of blended learning, let's say, approach?
Yeah, of course. Like, for example, this semester and previous semester, for example, I have that from my own experience. I have courses with 44 students, 27 students, 3 students, and 3 students. Even some of the students are in their practicum last year, some of them in English, others in different disciplines. I'm teaching in Arabic language, English language. Yeah, it's totally different, because the engagement now, and I'm also using kind of flipped classroom, especially with the English majors students. So we are using different kind of program like Socrates, Kahoot, Lino, Padlet. So for example, they are watching some videos, and after that they write their discussions. So yeah, now with engaging with more technologies and applications, and me and my students actually at the same time we are searching for a new kind of applications to use based on the topics. Yeah, it's totally different and interesting, and I think the students start to like it more.
When they started to get used to it.
Yeah, especially with kind of games and all that.
Yes, you're totally right. We have another question from Khalid. He's saying, based on this study, which do you think is better, blended or face-to-face learning?
It depends, actually. Because you are not only the teacher who's, you have to think about the students. Because some of the students, they mentioned that, they prefer the face-to-face. Maybe because, the isolation issues, maybe. Some of them, they prefer the blended and the online. For me, blended is okay. So if we have face-to-face and blended with the online, is good. Both of them. So we can, adapt to all the students' needs.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ghada, for this very interesting research. I would like to ask our attendees to please provide your feedback through the link that you will find in the chat box.